Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I will be your host, and in this episode, we are going to be doing a draft review. I had my first fantasy football draft of the season a couple days ago on August 27th. The date I am recording this episode is August 29th, 2024. In this draft that we're going to go over, it is a one quarterback league, half PPR, 10-team league. It's 2 running backs, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 2 flexes. Okay, so double flex. And then we do have a DST and a kicker as well. And it looks like we have 8 bench spots as well as 1 IR. Like I said, this is my first draft that I have done all year for the 2024 fantasy football season. It's a little work league, actually a league with some former coworkers at my old job. And yeah, I'm excited to get into it. I try to be very honest with myself after drafts, whether I like my team or not, because I've drafted some teams that I did not like, and I've drafted some teams that I do like, and I feel like I usually have a pretty good read on how the team looks. So as we go through this draft, we're going to, go over some fantasy analysis, give some draft tips, talk about some values. And then another important part of this draft is I have the 10th overall pick. So that's kind of a weird spot to draft from. In a 10-team league, so I get the last pick and then I draft again in each round. And yeah, before we get into it, please make sure to drop a like and follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And yeah, let's hop right into it. So I had the 10th overall pick. My team is the West Side Weepers. So I'm gonna go pick by pick. I'm not just gonna talk about my own picks. I'm gonna try to, give a actual analysis of the entire draft, especially for you people who are listening to the audio only podcast. If you want video, I would recommend heading over to YouTube, Fantasy Football Prodigy. Over there on the YouTube channel, you can actually see the draft board. But ESPN has a weird draft board. It's not really a board, it's more of a list. So you are going to see 2 rounds at a time. But let's get right into it. First overall, Christian McCaffrey, obvious pick. If you wanted to go CeeDee Lamb, who was number 2, I wouldn't blame you. Bijan Robinson, number 3, Breece Hall, number 4, all great picks, could be number 1 overall picks. A little bit surprising here, though. Amon-Ra St. Brown goes 5. I don't dislike it, but Tyreek Hill and Jamar Chase going 6 and 7. That is really good value on those guys. Justin Jefferson at 8, Saquon Barkley at 9, and then I am on the clock. And this is exactly how I wanted to start my draft from this spot. A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, wide receiver, and Jahmyr Gibbs, running back for the Detroit Lions. Gibbs has been a little bit banged up, I believe, with a hamstring injury, which is a little worrisome. But hopefully that doesn't have any effect later on in the year. It's always scary when it's a hamstring injury, but he's so good when he's on the field. The Lions offense is great. I just kind of wanted him over Jonathan Taylor, who has his own health issues. And Kyren Williams, I think, would have also been like a fair pick at running back, but I just went with Jahmyr Gibbs. And then A.J. Brown at wide receiver. He is the last of his tier, I think, because after A.J. Brown, the wide receivers were Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson. Those are all good players, but I think A.J. Brown is just a tier above those guys. So I think I really got a great wide receiver pick. I got the last of kind of that, of a certain tier, of an elite tier. I don't think he's quite in the CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill tier, but he's like the next one down. So when you're drafting, you want to make sure you're drafting in tiers. So you kind of group players together, like similar valued players, I guess you would say, or players that you expect to have a similar outcome, rather than just looking at like a top 200 sheet. So for example, if there's, 1 wide receiver left in that tier, but there's, 5 running backs left, you want to probably take that receiver because, by the time you draft again, that tier of wide receiver is going to be gone, whereas you might have one of those running backs fall back to you. So that's kind of how tier-based drafting works, just to kind of touch on that. And yeah, moving on, after Jahmyr Gibbs goes Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Jonathan Taylor, Kyren Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. That's a little rich for my blood for the rookie. I mean, I think you'll have a good rookie year, but to pay off at that draft capital of the 2.6 he's going to have a really good year, not just like, oh, he was 1,000-yard receiver. Like, no, he's going to have to be like a top-tier elite talent, which he could do. He's a very good prospect and a good offense with a good quarterback. After Marvin Harrison Jr., Puka Nacua, who did have that crazy rookie year last year. Garrett Wilson, Isaiah Pacheco, and then Derrick Henry rounds out round 2. And then before we move on to round 3, in addition to reminding you guys to follow and subscribe wherever you're listening, this is a kind of it's a work league, and there are some casual to not very knowledgeable players, we'll say. So while if you're in like a more expert or experienced league, some of these things you're going to see in this draft might not happen. A lot of you are probably playing in leagues like this where there are some people who aren't as experienced. So we are going to see some kind of funky things take place, and it's still valuable to kind of evaluate and look at just because these things will happen in your league. So it's important to look at those too. So we'll talk about that when we get to those type of things. But after Derrick Henry, Chris Olave, Travis Etienne, Michael Pittman Jr., Nico Collins, Rashad White, Josh Allen, the first QB off the board, I believe, James Cook, Drake London, and then DK Metcalf. So Drake London at the 3-8, he's someone who I often don't want to draft just because, you know, his ADP can be kind of high on some websites and in some drafts, but at the 3-8, that's really not a bad value. I mean, obviously you would like him to have his best season of his career, but I think he probably will. So I don't hate that value there. And then DK Metcalf is one of my favorite values in the draft. But another guy I love a lot, Deebo Samuel Jr. or Senior. Sorry. Does anyone ever call him Deebo Samuel Senior? I think people just call him Deebo Samuel, or rather just Deebo. But I went with him for the 49ers wide receiver with my 3rd round pick, last pick in the 3rd round. I just love Deebo. He misses a few games from time to time, but when he's on the field, that offense is great. He gets carries in the running game. He's great after the catch. With that 49ers offense, outside of CMC, the other weapons in the offense do have weeks where they disappear at times, just dependent on game plan. But Deebo Samuel in the 3rd round is a great value. And I do like to get shares of Deebo Samuel when I can. Sorry if you've heard this story before, but many years ago, I think it was after Deebo's 2nd or 3rd year when he hadn't quite broken out yet, I once upon a time traded him away in Dynasty straight up for Chase Claypool after Claypool's great rookie year. And we all know how that turned out. Chase Claypool is still on my Dynasty roster as a clog. I'm debating cutting him right now, but because I have to cut my roster down and I need one more person to cut. But yeah, ever since then, and then obviously Deebo went on to be the number 2 wide receiver that year that I traded him, only behind Cooper Kupp, who had one of the best seasons ever with the Triple Crown. But I digress. I do like to get some Deebo on my team just so I can kind of, if he does continue to have good years when I wasted him in Dynasty, at least I'll have him in redraft. And then with the first pick in the 4th round, I got Devon Achane. Now, this is a winner-take-all league. So you want to get first place. Basically, obviously you want to get first place no matter what, but in a lot of leagues, if you get 2nd or 3rd or high points for the season, you might get a little something. For this, it's winner take all. And Devon Achane in the 4th round to me was a smash pick. It really was between him and Alvin Kamara. And I love Alvin Kamara, especially in a PPR or a half PPR league like this one is, because he wasn't very efficient last year, but he saw a ton of targets, and I expect more of the same. And I think he's going to be a really good running back 1 value in the 4th round. But Achane has league-winning ability, and in the 4th round, I love it. Like, if you have to draft him way earlier, that's when it gets a little more sketchy. But when he was on the field last year, he was historically explosive and efficient. His whole thing is just staying healthy, just because, he's a little bit undersized, and he dealt with some injuries last year, but even if he misses a few games, he's going to be an insane value when he's on the field. So, especially in a winner-take-all league, I went with Devon Achane, someone who I didn't think I was going to draft a lot of this year, but in my first draft, I took him because I didn't have to, take him in like the 2nd or even the 3rd round. I got him in the 4th round, so I love that. Josh Jacobs goes next. Sam Laporta, the first tight end off the board, hit a great rookie year. He's going to have to do it again to pay off at this ADP, but in the 4th round, it's not a bad bet. Alvin Kamara goes next. I like that value a ton. He's one of my favorite values in the draft. If Achane wasn't there, I probably would have gone Kamara. Cooper Kupp, another guy who, if he stays healthy, he's dealt with injuries and he's getting older, but even if he misses just a few games, when he's on the field, he should be valuable in the 4th round. DJ Moore for the Bears goes next. Malik Neighbors, another rookie wide receiver. Joe Mixon, Travis Kelce, not the number 1 tight end drafted. for the first time in what seems like forever. And then Stephon Diggs in the 4th round. We're going to move on to rounds 5 and 6 now. Patty Mahomes goes first pick in the 5th round, then Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Kenneth Walker, Ramondre Stevenson, Jalen Waddle, Lamar Jackson, Dalton Kincaid, and then I am on the clock. As I was waiting for my pick, I was kind of hoping that Jalen Waddle would fall to me, although I do already have Devon Achane, so I don't really love to invest multiple early picks in players on the same team. I will say, however, in that Dolphins offense, I think both of those guys will be good for fantasy, and I think Jalen Waddle will have a better year than he did last year. But I got 2 of my favorite values still in the draft in James Conner, running back of the Arizona Cardinals, and Amari Cooper, wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns. I've gone wide receiver, running back, and then once again, I go technically running back, wide receiver, but yeah, I'm pretty balanced here so far in this draft. So James Conner in the 5th round, and the last pick of the 5th round, to me is just a really good value. He's not a flashy pick. He's another guy who I traded away in Dynasty years ago. Like, I think I traded him for James Robinson after his great year. And again, like, I just wasted James Conner. Like, you know, at the time, that's when he was with the Steelers still, I think. And it was all like, oh, James Conner, you got to get rid of him. It's not going to last. He's not that good. He's frail. And he does miss a few games every year, it seems like. But he's still, when he's playing, he's a very good player. Kind of in the back stretch of the year last season, he was amazing for fantasy once Kyler Murray got back and the offense started clicking. So I think the Cardinals offense is a huge bounce back candidate. And to get the starting running back for them, who's been good for fantasy in the 5th round, I like that. He's my running back 3. So I love that value there. And then Amari Cooper, another guy who probably has a little bit of name fatigue. Quarterback situation in Cleveland isn't great. You know, Deshaun Watson has been kind of iffy at best with the Browns, but even with that being said, he did supply Cooper with some good games in there. So Amari Cooper in the 6th round as my wide receiver 3. I really like that value, and he does have big game potential as well. We saw that, I think it was against the Jets. I think it was in the fantasy playoffs. Might have even been the championship last year where he just went nuclear. So Amari Cooper. Actually, another guy I traded away in Dynasty in my Dynasty League. I think I actually got pretty fair value in return where I didn't just waste him. I think it was like Joe Mixon and something, but and then I traded away Joe Mixon, of course. Do you guys like listening to me just talking about all my players that I got rid of in Dynasty? But anyways, yeah, so I like those values right there. Moving on, CJ Stroud, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, Aaron Jones, Zay Flowers, Anthony Richardson, and DeAndre Swift round out the 6th. Moving on to the 7th and 8th round. Make sure you are following or subscribed wherever you are listening. Let's get right into round 7. T. Higgins, Tank Dell. And I was considering Tank Dell. That was actually the other player I was considering instead of Amari Cooper. I think in that offense, with what we saw last year, Tank Dell could be a stud. It's a little crowded with Nico and Diggs and Tank Dell all there, but I don't know. I just think he might be a little inconsistent just because maybe different receivers will have their weeks, but especially if Diggs isn't the same player that he was, you know, like a few years ago, Tank Dell might be a, you know, crazy value here. Chris Godwin goes next. I mean, yeah, I don't really like, to me, that's a tier break. Like, I would much rather have like Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley. I'm not a big Zay Flowers guy this year. T. Higgins, Tank Dell over Chris Godwin. Like, I have Godwin in my Dynasty League as well, and it's like, I know I want him to kind of have a bit of a career resurgence and maybe score a couple more touchdowns this year. PPR's way to a little more consistency, but it's just not a flashy pick here. But I'm not trying to hate on Chris Godwin. I'm just kind of trying to touch on that tier-based thing. But Evan Ingram goes next. Zamir White, Najee Harris, Rashee Rice in the 7th round. I mean, I'd probably rather have him over Godwin too, just being tied to Patrick Mahomes. And his value has definitely been suppressed with his off-field issues in the offseason, but it's looking more and more like it's not going to affect him this year. Like, just, you know, we got to wait for things to play out with, you know, legally and everything. And there's a really good chance that he just plays a full season this year and is their number 1 wide receiver. And last year, I mean, that the back stretch of the season, he was believe he was a wide receiver 1 for some stretch of the year. Joe Burrow, a really good quarterback value there. Terry McLaurin, and then I am up, and I got one of my favorite values, if not my favorite value in all of fantasy football drafts, and that's Kyler Murray, quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals. I've talked about how I like their offense to bounce back. Kyler Murray is a mobile runner. He provides passing game production. He was coming off an ACL last year, and he was still great for fantasy when he came back, and he came back to a dreadful offense with no wide receiver. His wide receiver 1 was Trey McBride. And now they just added Marvin Harrison Jr. They brought in Zay Jones, which is, I guess, he's suspended, but that's something. Trey McBride is still there. Michael Wilson Jr. is in his second year. So I think this is, if he stays healthy, like if he just plays football, he's going to be a value here. Especially compared to Anthony Richardson, who went at the end of the 6th. I got Kyler Murray at the end of the 7th. And it's like, well, we're hoping that Anthony Richardson can become Kyler Murray, but I got him around later. I think Richardson might have a little higher ceiling just because he's kind of a freak runner. Like he could offer more in the running game, but if he turned into Kyler Murray fantasy points per game wise, I mean, you'd be happy. So I love that value. And then Jaden Reed, he just seemed like the clear choice here for my 8th round pick, wide receiver for the Packers. You know, I could have gone Montgomery, paired him with Gibbs. You know, even though they're on the same team, I could have done that, and then they would both be playable. And if one got hurt, then the other one would be even better. But again, this is a winner-take-all league, so I wanted to diversify a little bit. Take a guy who I think has, I don't know, like I feel like at the end of last year he was getting a lot of praise, but I feel like now he's almost undervalued. Like I feel this is a good place to take him, but I don't know. I'm more excited about having Jaden Reed than I would be Terry McLaurin or Chris Godwin. Like I think what we saw last year shows that, you know, in a good Packers offense, he's going to be valuable. Like there's a lot of weapons there, but I think he's good enough to be one of the main targets. So Jaden Reed, David Montgomery, George Kittle, a really good value at tight end. If you can just throw out this narrative that he's going to be that tight end that he was whatever year he set the yardage record for tight ends, I don't think that's in his range of outcomes without an injury or an Ayuk trade. But in the 8th round, if George Kittle's your tight end, like that's really good value. Most tight ends are inconsistent, and he at least offers boom potential, and he's not as inconsistent as you would think. At least last year he wasn't. He has had his years where he's been pretty inconsistent, but in terms of the tight end landscape, last year was actually pretty solid. Another guy that I traded away in Dynasty. I think I gave up him and a first for Kyle Pitts like a year or two ago. So we all know that hasn't worked out yet, but Kirk Cousins, I believe in you. Get him going. After Kittle, Tajay Spears, Ladd McConkey, Christian Watson, another wide receiver for the Packers. I would personally take Reed over Watson, as I literally did in this draft. I mean, Watson had that really good stretch of, you know, a few games years ago, but I don't say this with most players because every player gets hurt at some point, but he is an injury-prone player, and even when he's on the field, it hasn't been super great other than that stretch, you know? Raheem Mostert, another value that I love in fantasy. He was the running back 2 in fantasy last year. I don't expect that to happen again, but, you know, it's going to be a really high-value committee with him and Achane, and if Achane gets hurt, Mostert's going to be a league winner again, vice versa. If Mostert gets hurt, Achane's going to be a league winner. And then there's another league winner in that backfield that I drafted. We'll talk about that later, so stay tuned. Kyle Pitts, the aforementioned Kyle Pitts goes next. Keenan Allen of the Bears. And then Deontay Johnson, wide receiver of the Panthers, rounds out round 8. We're going to move on to round 9 here. Jake Ferguson, tight end of the Dallas Cowboys. So I was sweating here. So in the 7th and 8th round, I did not go tight end. And I was hoping one of a couple guys would follow me. And one of those guys was Jake Ferguson. And he went with the first pick in the 9th round. So he's a guy I really like. It's kind of weird when you're on the ends of your draft. You can't really play that ADP, wait for a guy to come back to you type of game, because you have to wait a long time, especially in a 12-team league, to draft again. So that's something we had to deal with here, but it did work out, as you'll see in a second here. So Jake Ferguson, then Jackson Smith and Jigba, Dak Prescott, a super great value in the 9th round at QB. Brock Purdy, Jaden Daniels. I'm sorry to keep harping on quarterback values, but Jaden Daniels, with the rushing potential he offers in the 9th round, he could be a high-end quarterback 1. And in the 9th round, if he doesn't work out, oh well, you invested a 9th round pick. But if he's on the field, he's going to be good if he runs, which he will run. Brian Robinson Jr., another Washington Commander. I really like that value too. Like, I'm just trying to kind of shout out some values that I see here. I mean, he had a stretch last year where he was a top end running back, like a running back 1. And then I believe he had some sort of injury setback and it kind of tailed off a little bit, but I don't know. Eckler might eat into the passing workload a little bit, but I don't know. Eckler seemed pretty cooked last year, unless he was dealing with some injury or something, but love that pick in Brian Robinson Jr. Chase Brown goes next. Javonte Williams. Roma Dunze, not a huge fan of taking him in general, just because I think he's the clear wide receiver 3 there. In Dynasty 11, but for this year, without an injury, I think it'll be rough, especially with a rookie quarterback. They just often don't provide the touchdowns needed for 1, much less 2, or in this case, 3 fantasy options. But in the 9th round, it's probably worth that price. And then I'm up. I take Christian Kirk. Very safe player. As I think he'd be my wide receiver 4 or 5 at this point. So I not a super exciting player, but gonna get targets. Calvin Ridley's gone. They brought in Gabe Davis, drafted Brian Thomas. But I think he'll have his role. So I think that's just a nice, solid PPR pick, someone I can play whenever needed. And this was the guy that I was hoping fell to me. I was hoping either Jake Ferguson or this guy, David Njoku, fell to me. In this part of the draft, I think there was a little bit of a tier break here at tight end. So it actually paid off for me to not reach on a guy like Jake Ferguson or Njoku with my 8th overall or with my 8th round pick, because I was able to take Kyler Murray and Jaden Reed. And if I would have taken those tight ends there, I would have, instead of taking Jaden Reed, I would have had to take, like a Cortland Sutton, Jordan Addison, Keon Coleman, someone I'm much less confident in than who I ended up with. So it worked out where I got the very end of, to me, Njoku and Ferguson is like the last tier of tight end that I'm really comfortable with before I'm just completely punting tight end. There's a couple guys I like taking shots on later, which I'll talk about once we get there. But yeah, I feel like I played it perfectly where luckily Njoku fell to me. And, I'm okay with that. I do have him. I have 2 Cleveland Browns, him and Amari Cooper. So we'll see how that goes. But he was the clear pick there for me. Next up, Jalen Warren, Zach Moss, Brock Bowers, who, if Njoku wasn't there, I probably would have gone Bowers, even though I don't normally draft him or think about drafting him, just because rookie tight ends don't usually work out outside of, Sam Laporta had a good year. He still might have been my pick there, just because in the 10th round, I think he could be utilized in a way where he sees, enough volume to be good. And he's just a really good tight end prospect, like one of the best ever. Cortland Sutton, Brian Thomas Jr., Austin Eckler, Jordan Addison, Keon Coleman, and Tony Pollard to end the 10th round. Moving on to the 11th round, TJ Hawkinson. Gonna miss the first part of the year, but can be put on IR. Although I believe this team was auto drafting. Maybe. I don't know. I think she was there. But not a super experienced player, but we'll see if she should throw him on IR, pick someone up. Devin Singletary, Xavier Worthy, DeAndre Hopkins, Jonathan Brooks. I was hoping Brooks fell to me, not only because I think when he comes back, he could be a really good value, even though the Panthers offense is a little scary in a bad way, but he is out, which means I could have put him on injured reserve and picked someone up. Blake Corum goes next, a really good handcuff for the Rams. Zach Charbonnet, another handcuff back. The Cleveland Browns defense, our first kicker, so first defense and kicker go off the board, Brandon Aubrey. And then with the 11th round, in the 10th pick in the 11th round, I go Gus Edwards, running back of the LA Chargers. And did I say that the teams that they were on before? Christian Kirk, I took wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jags, David Njoku, tight end of the Cleveland Browns. Okay, so those are my previous 2 picks. Gus Edwards, running back of the Chargers. Obviously, they got rid of Austin Eckler. Was his contract up? Did they just let him walk? I think that's what happened. I can't remember. It's been a while. Maybe they cut him. Whatever. He's gone. They signed Gus Edwards, And J.K. Dobbins is really the only competition on that depth chart, and he's dealt with injuries. So I feel like he's a really good value there. I think he should be the goal line back. He might not be super electric just because he probably won't catch a ton of passes, but they bring in Harbaugh and Greg Roman. They're going to run the ball, and they have one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Justin Herbert, but their offensive weapons are just a little lackluster. So I'm very interested to see how this works out. But if the offense clicks and there are scoring opportunities, I think Gus Edwards as the goal line back is a really good value here. I think he's going to be the starter, hopefully. If not, I guess I'll cut him. And then next up, I took Jacoby Myers, wide receiver of the Raiders. I didn't really like this pick. The clock was kind of running down, and I'm like, okay, I'll take Jacoby. He's a safe pick. He started the year really, really hot last year, tailed off quite a bit at the end. Devontae Adams is the clear one there. They drafted Brock Bowers. Gardner Minshew is going to be the starter, which isn't great, but he did supply production for Michael Pittman last year. But as the 2 or maybe even the 3 in this offense, he might be someone that gets cut. I have tried to float him out in some trade offers as like a part of a package, and so far no one has bitten, but not an exciting pick, I will admit. J.K. Dobbins goes next. Justin Tucker, Tyler Lockett. I almost wish I would have took Lockett over Myers, but I think he's a good value there. Jerry Jeudy, Nick Chubb, Justin Herbert, who we just talked about. Jordan Love. This might have been my favorite quarterback value in the entire draft. I was sitting there. I already had Kyler Murray, so I didn't take him, but even when I was drafting with the first pick of the 12th round, I was like, do I take Jordan Love here just because of the value? But I didn't. I'm a stupid Jacoby Myers. But Jordan Love, now, like I said, some teams are not very experienced. This team right here, she was auto drafting, and you can't see my mouse on the screen. What the heck? That's weird. But I think she ended up with 4 quarterbacks because the ESPN auto draft gave her 4 QBs. So ESPN, let's fix that. This is a 1 quarterback league, by the way, as I mentioned. So Ezekiel Elliott, I think that's honestly not a bad pick. It's the Cowboys offense. Someone's got to run the ball. Is it him or Rico Dowdle? I don't know, but it's Zeke. He'll probably be the starter. And then Aaron Rodgers goes next. To get Jordan Love 2 picks before Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers is one of the best to ever do it, but for fantasy this year, Jordan Love, that's a great value. Next up in the 13th round, Rodgers' teammate Mike Williams goes. I have him in Dynasty. Let's hope he comes off the ACL just fine. But if there's any trade offers in my league, hit me up. Caleb Williams, Marquise Hollywood Brown, Adam Thielen, Pat Freiermuth. Freiermuth is one of those guys that I'm cool taking a late shot on, even though it probably won't be great. He's flashed. So usually he flashes and he doesn't put it together for a full season, but at this point in the draft, even if that happens, you're probably happy. Kirk Cousins, Khalil Shakir, Jerome Ford. If you're doing 0 RB or a hero running back and you just need someone to play in a running back starting spot, Ford is going to be the starter for the first part of the year as Nick Chubb recovers from that injury. So great value. I'm not sure if this team really needed that 0 RB help. Okay, I tried to open a new tab, but it just went to the top of the screen for some reason. Interesting. Anyways, but that is a 0 running back just hero right there, dude. Yeah, if you need a guy to start in the 13th round, that's a fantastic pick. Ravens DST, and then I'm up. I take Trey Benson and Jalen Wright, 2 handcuff running backs. So I have both starting running backs for those teams. So Trey Benson of the Cardinals, Jalen Wright of the Dolphins. I already have James Conner and Devon Achane. I don't normally like handcuffing my own running backs. But there are a couple situations where I do. So if there's a clear backup, that's a good time to do it, because a lot of times people roster their handcuff, their guy goes down, and then it's still a committee, and the guy that they picked up or drafted to be a handcuff isn't even valuable still. Or if they have big upside, and I guess in this case also if the players are injury prone. So I'm not going to call Achane injury prone, but he's smaller and he was injured quite a bit in his rookie year. Okay. James Conner has never played a full season, I don't think. So Trey Benson will be a starter for some games. And I believe kind of the narrative is that he started camp a little slow, but lately it's been a little more positive. So Trey Benson was drafted high he's a rookie this year. Same with Jalen Wright. He's a rookie. So if an injury occurs, Trey Benson's going to be really good that week. And if Connor's out for the year, Trey Benson just slides in as a starting running back. Jalen Wright, and we have pretty big benches too. Jalen Wright, not only if Achane goes down, but if Mostert goes down. So if one of those two guys who has dealt with injuries goes down, Jalen Wright probably becomes the number one waiver wire pickup of the week. So in the 14th round, I'll take that over, someone who probably doesn't have as much upside. Dalton Schultz of the Texans, Dontavian Wicks, and the little sleeper pick at wide receiver. I don't mind it. Jalen Polk, Dallas Goedert, Xavier Legette, Ty Chandler, Chuba Hubbard, another great zero running back target as Brooks comes back from the injury. Chuba's going to start. I just traded away Miles Sanders in fantasy like today or yesterday for barely, I think I did like him, Frank Gore Jr., and a 2027 third rounder for Matt Stafford and a 2027 fourth. It was some really, really weird, obscure trade with a rebuilding team, but I got rid of Sanders. He's pretty much done, which means now that I said that, he'll cook. Tyler Conklin and then Darnell Mooney. I like that value for Mooney. I think he's a little bit slept on right now. I know he had a good year a couple years ago, and then last year wasn't great, but he had Justin Fields as his quarterback. So moving on. Cowboys DST, Harrison Butker, Tyler Algier, Gabe Davis, Jared Goff, really good quarterback value there. And this team, this is the team that drafted Jaden Daniels, and that's a great guy to pair with Daniels because Goff has a pretty good opening schedule, and if Daniels gets off to a bad start, you can just plug Goff in and he'll be good, probably. Jameson Williams, Goff's teammate, nice little, I don't think it's going to work out, but it could as their wide receiver too. Rico Dowdle, he's also a good pick. Same with Zeke. I did drop Rico Dowdle in Dynasty, so he'll probably be good. I dropped him last year, kind of assuming that he would not be their starting running back. But Jerry Jones, what are we doing? Kendre Miller, Curtis Samuel, and then I take the Jets DST. I normally don't take a defense or a kicker before like the last pick, but the Jets defense is good enough where I'm like, you know what, let's do it. And then I go Josh Palmer. He might be the number one wide receiver for Justin Herbert. Like I said, they don't have a lot of weapons. They drafted Ladd McConkey. Quentin Johnson is their first round pick, but he's kind of a bust. And there's Josh Palmer. I think they also signed like DJ Chark. So they have Hayden Hurst and Will Dissly at tight end. Running back room is a little weak with Dobbins and Gus Edwards. So Josh Palmer has had games. So in the 16th round, I don't mind taking a shot there. Same with like Rashid Shaheed, who goes next. That's not a bad pick. Jaleel McLaughlin, that's also to me like, we don't know if Javonte is going to be the same player ever again. Like he's their running back too, good pass catcher. They cut Samaje Perine, so he's the clear two, and it might be more of a split than people are thinking. Younghoe Koo, 49ers DST, Steelers DST, Jake Elliott, Deshaun Watson, fourth quarterback for that team, Vikings defense, and then Tua goes in with the last pick in the 16th round to Hawk Tua, named after this draft pick, which is a really good draft name. Tua, I think, is a little undervalued. He started the last couple seasons hot, trailed off at the end. I think he could start hot again. I think I was hearing like his opening schedule is pretty good, so he might be a value. Maybe someone you just draft and trade, honestly. To end off the draft, we're in round 17 now. Kyrie Fairbairn, Adonai Mitchell, Dolphins, Jaguars defense. Marshawn Lloyd, I was hoping he fell to me. I opened my stupid mouth. I didn't realize this, but during the draft, I was like, AJ Dillon just got put on IR. And this person who drafted him was like, oh, really? I was like, oh, no, what have I done? And then, sure enough, he took Marshawn Lloyd. So that was on me. That's another takeaway. Is if news breaks, maybe keep it to yourself until the draft is over. Because he's going to be probably the clear running back too. He is also dealing with an injury himself, but Dillon's out for the year, so I think they're going to have, Jacobs will be the workhorse, but I wouldn't be surprised if Lloyd is involved in the 17th round. That's a great value. Demario Douglas, little PPR guy, Bengals DST, Romeo Doubs, Trevor Lawrence, and then I get Taysom Hill. I did take a backup tight end just because I didn't like a ton of the players left. I probably could have taken Ray Davis as a handcuff, but I already had a couple handcuffs. And Taysom Hill, he's a weird player, but I've heard he's going to be used in the running game a little bit and on the goal line this year. And I didn't take Alvin Kamara, so maybe if Taysom Hill vultures some of that those touchdowns from Kamara, maybe it'll work out in my favor where I kind of bet against Kamara when I took Achane. And maybe if, that was the right decision, maybe that'll translate to Hill being good. And I have Njoku, but don't get me wrong, last year to end the year, he was the best tight end in fantasy. But that was with Flacco. And we just don't know if that's going to be replicated. Certainly not that level of production. But if Njoku isn't like a locked in every week starter, Taysom Hill might be someone I use. And then Evan McPherson is my kicker for the Bengals to start the 18th round. And then we got Antonio Gibson, Ray Davis, Matt Stafford, Greg Zuerlein, Cameron Dicker, Michael Wilson, Jake Moody, Brandon Cooks, and then Mr. Irrelevant, Khalil Herbert of the Bears. So that is the draft. Really quick, we're going to go over the team. Let's see. Zoom out. All right, so here is the squad. For the Westside Weepos, we got Kyler Murray as my starting quarterback. A lot of teams in this league have more than one quarterback, so if I need to pick someone up, it's a little slim. I can even show you right here, which it almost makes me wish I would have taken a second quarterback, but Trevor Lawrence got dropped, it looks like. That must have happened pretty recently. Go to recent activity. There it is. Recent activity. Someone added Baker Mayfield and dropped Trevor Lawrence. I mean, okay. I don't know. Neither is super exciting, but yeah. I mean, Will Levis is a late round quarterback that I might add if I get the roster space because I think he could be good. He's got weapons and he's willing to chuck it. So, anyways, I digress. Back to my team. Kyler Murray at quarterback. At running back, we got Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Conner, and then Gus Edwards on the bench, Jalen Wright, and Trey Benson as my handcuffs. And then a wide receiver, really good core of A.J. Brown, Amari Cooper, Deebo Samuel, and then Jaden Reed and Christian Kirk on the bench is amazing. Jacoby Myers and Joshua Palmer are in there as well. Maybe as spot starts, maybe as people like cut. Tight end, David Njoku, and then Taysom Hill on the bench. And then my DST is the Jets, and my kicker is Evan McPherson. The Jets are on the road in San Francisco, so I was thinking I might want to pick up the Saints defense because they are at home against the Carolina Panthers, who had a dreadful offense last year and probably will have a dreadful offense this year. And they're at home in that dome, and they have a good defense. I just don't know who to cut. I don't want to cut the Jets defense because I think when they have a good matchup, they'll be really good. I don't typically like to roster two defenses, which is why I almost regret reaching on the Jets, and I should have just waited, drafted the Saints last, and then just streamed a defense every week. But if I were to cut someone, it would probably be Taysom Hill or Joshua Palmer. I don't really want to drop the Jets, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm trying to do a 2-for-1 trade, like Jacoby Myers and Gus Edwards or someone where I can open up a roster spot. Because if you do that 2-for-1 trade where you're giving away more players than you're getting back, not only are you getting the value of that player you're receiving, but you're also getting the value of having that open roster spot to pick someone else up, which is always valuable, especially early in the year. Don't hold on to your fab or your waiver priority early in the year. You want to get those guys added early when they break out early, because usually those are the ones that are the best because they made an impact week 1 because they're part of the game plan for the year. And also you just get them for more of the season. You get them from weeks 2 to the end versus 10 to the end if you save your fab. So obviously be smart. Don't just blow it all. But yeah, this is the team. I really like it. I actually genuinely think this is a good team. It's kind of hard to tell in the 10-team league because everyone's team is pretty good. But like I said, I usually have a pretty good read on how my teams are looking. Sometimes I leave a draft not liking my team, and usually it doesn't go well. I really do like this team. I think we got some good consistency, but also some really explosive players. And like I said, it's winner take all. So we were going to try to win the whole thing more than normal. So yeah, that's going to do it for the episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to drop a like if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe or follow wherever you are watching. Good luck in your drafts. I hope this helped you become a fantasy football prodigy. I will see you in the next one. Peace.